Welcome back to another journey through the stars. Tonight, we're exploring one of the most iconic pieces of technology in science fiction history: the mass relays of Mass Effect. These colossal structures, scattered across the Milky Way like ancient monuments, fundamentally shaped galactic civilization in ways both wondrous and terrifying. Before we dive into the depths of this fascinating technology, if you enjoy these explorations of sci-fi lore, hitting that subscribe button really helps the channel grow. Now, settle in as we unravel the story of the structures that connected a galaxy and the dark purpose hidden within their elegant design. Picture this. You're standing on the observation deck of a starship, looking out at something that defies easy comprehension. Two massive curved arms, each stretching 15 kilometers into the void, embrace a set of revolving gyroscopic rings 5 kilometers across. At the heart of these rings pulses a blue glow, brilliant and cold, the signature of Element 0, working on a scale that makes planetary engineering look like child's play. This is a mass relay, and it's about to fling your ship across thousands of light years in the blink of an eye. The mass relays are, on their surface, exactly what they appear to be: the greatest transportation network ever conceived. They turn a galaxy that would take centuries to cross into a neighborhood where you can travel from one spiral arm to another in hours or days. They're the reason the Asari could meet the Solarians, why the Turians could enforce Citadel law across vast distances, why humanity could explode onto the galactic stage after discovering just one of these ancient structures. Without the relays, the galactic civilization as we know it in Mass Effect simply couldn't exist. But like so many things in Mass Effect's universe, the relays are more than they seem. They're not just transportation. They're not just ancient Prothean technology left behind for younger races to discover. They're something far more calculated, far more sinister. They're a trap, carefully baited and patiently waiting. And to understand why, we need to start at the beginning, with the discovery that changed everything for humanity. Chapter 1: The Moon That Wasn't. The year was 2148, and humanity had just made the most important archaeological discovery in its history. On Mars, beneath the red dust and ancient stone, explorers found a cache of Prothean technology. This wasn't just artifacts or ruins. This was a data repository, a library left behind by a civilization that had vanished 50,000 years ago. The information contained within that cache would catapult human technology forward by decades, maybe centuries. Among the discoveries was knowledge of Element 0, a substance that would come to be called the most important material in the galaxy. Element 0, or EZO as it's commonly known, has a unique property. When subjected to an electrical current, It generates what's called a mass effect field. These fields can increase or decrease the mass of objects within their influence, and that simple capability opens up possibilities that seem like magic to anyone unfamiliar with the science. Reduce the mass of a starship to near zero, and suddenly you can accelerate it to speeds that would otherwise require impossible amounts of energy. You've effectively changed the rules of physics within that localized field. The speed of light isn't an absolute barrier anymore, at least not in the way Einstein described. Within a mass effect field, you can raise the effective speed of light, allowing for faster than light travel without the time dilation effects that would normally accompany relativistic speeds. But the Mars cache pointed to something even more significant. The data spoke of structures scattered throughout the galaxy, ancient relays that could transport ships across vast distances instantaneously. And it gave humanity coordinates that pointed to something in their own solar system. Something that had been hiding in plain sight for as long as humans had been looking at the stars. Pluto's moon Charon had always been a bit odd. Discovered in 1978, it was unusually large relative to Pluto itself, leading some scientists to consider the Pluto-Charon system a binary planet rather than a planet and moon. But nobody had suspected the truth. Charon wasn't a moon at all. It was a mass relay encased in ice, gravitationally anchored to Pluto, waiting patiently for someone to find it and wake it up. The discovery sent shockwaves through human civilization. This wasn't just ancient technology. This was a functional gateway to the stars, sitting right in humanity's backyard. In 2149, just a year after the Mars discovery, an expedition led by John Grissom activated the Charon relay. The structure shed its icy coating, its ancient systems coming online after millennia of dormancy. The blue glow of its element zero core illuminated the outer solar system, and humanity took its first step beyond the neighborhood. The Charon relay connected to another relay in the Arcturus system, about 36 light years from Earth. That journey, which would have taken decades even with the newly developed FTL drives humanity had built using Prothean data, took mere hours through the relay. On the other side, explorers found more relays, a network stretching across the galaxy, connecting star systems in a web of instantaneous transportation. Humanity did what humanity does best. They explored aggressively, activating every relay they could find, eager to map the network and claim new territory. This enthusiasm, this rush to open every door without checking what might be on the other side, would lead directly to humanity's first contact with alien life, and that contact would be violent. Chapter 2: The Rachni Lesson. To understand why humanity's relay activation spree was such a problem, we need to talk about the Rachni. Thousands of years before humans even existed as a species, the Solarians were exploring the relay network with the same enthusiasm that would later characterize human expansion. They were a young species, relatively speaking, having only recently achieved spaceflight and discovered their first relay. The Solarians opened a primary relay without knowing where it led. Primary relays are different from secondary relays in a crucial way. They can propel ships thousands of light years, often from one spiral arm of the galaxy to another, but they only connect to one other specific relay. They're paired, one-to-one connections across vast distances. Secondary relays, by contrast, can link to any other relay within a few hundred light years, offering more flexibility but less range. The relay the Solarians opened led to a system they'd never encountered before, and in that system, they found the Rachni. The Rachni were a species of spacefaring insects, guided by a hive-minded intelligence that was utterly alien to the individualistic Solarians. The first contact went poorly. The Rachni, for reasons that remain debated to this day, responded to the Solarian presence with immediate aggression. What followed was the Rachni Wars, a conflict that nearly destroyed galactic civilization before it had really begun. The Rachni were formidable opponents. Their hive mind allowed for perfect coordination. Their biology allowed them to survive in environments that would kill most species, and their reproduction rate meant that every battle lost to them resulted in more Rachni soldiers in the next engagement. The Solarians, despite their intelligence and tactical acumen, were being overwhelmed. The Council races, desperate for a solution, made a decision that would have profound consequences. They uplifted the Krogan, a species that had barely achieved nuclear technology, giving them advanced weapons and starships in exchange for their service as shock troops against the Rachni. The Krogan, tough and aggressive and capable of reproducing rapidly themselves, turned the tide of the war. The Rachni were driven back, their worlds sterilized, their species apparently rendered extinct. The lesson learned from the Rachni Wars was simple and stark. Don't open primary relays without knowing where they lead. You might unleash something you can't control. This became Citadel law, a regulation enforced by the Turians, who served as the Council's military arm. Any species found activating unknown primary relays would be stopped, by force if necessary. Which brings us back to humanity in 2157. 8 years after activating the Charon relay, human explorers, ignorant of Citadel law and the history behind it, were systematically activating every relay they encountered. They were mapping the network, claiming systems, establishing colonies. And then they activated Relay 314. The Turians, monitoring the relay network as part of their peacekeeping duties, detected the activation. They responded immediately, sending a fleet to stop what they saw as a dangerous violation of Council law. The humans, seeing alien warships approaching their exploration vessels, prepared to defend themselves. Neither side attempted communication. The Turians opened fire, destroying the human ships with ruthless efficiency. But one human vessel escaped and brought reinforcements. The Systems Alliance military, responding to what they perceived as an unprovoked attack, engaged the Turian fleet. The First Contact War had begun, a conflict born from mutual ignorance and the legacy of the Rachni Wars. The war was brief, lasting only 3 months before the Citadel Council intervened and brokered a peace. But it established several important precedents. Humanity learned that they weren't alone in the galaxy, that there were rules they'd been breaking, and that the relay network they'd been so enthusiastically exploring was governed by laws written in the blood of previous conflicts. The Turians learned that humanity was more formidable than they'd expected, capable of holding their own against a superior military force, and both sides learned the fundamental truth about the mass relays. They were dangerous, not just because of where they might lead, but because of what they represented. The relays encouraged rapid expansion, aggressive exploration, and the kind of territorial thinking that led to conflict. They were tools that shaped how civilizations developed, and not always in positive ways. Chapter 3: The Architecture of Instantaneous Travel. Let's talk about how these incredible structures actually work, because the engineering involved is staggering, even by the standards of a galaxy that is mastered faster than light travel. A mass relay isn't just a big machine. It's a carefully designed system that manipulates the fundamental fabric of space-time itself. The visible structure, those 15-kilometer arms and 5-kilometer rings, is made from a material that nobody in the current galactic cycle has been able to identify or reproduce. It's the same substance that the Citadel is constructed from, incredibly resilient and protected by what's called a quantum shield. This shield locks the structure in place at the subatomic level, making it nearly impervious to damage. Mass relays can survive supernovas without suffering any harm. They don't emit heat or radiation like normal structures, making them cold objects that can be difficult to detect if their position has shifted over time. At the heart of each relay is a massive element zero core, contained within those revolving gyroscopic rings. When activated, this core generates a mass effect field of unprecedented scale and precision. But unlike the mass effect fields used by Starship FTL drives, which simply reduce a ship's mass to allow faster-than-light travel, relay fields do something far more sophisticated. A relay creates what's described as a virtually mass-free corridor of space-time between itself and its paired relay. This isn't a wormhole in the traditional sense. It's more like a tunnel where the normal rules of physics are temporarily suspended. Within this corridor, a ship can be accelerated to speeds that make conventional FTL look like a leisurely stroll. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood by current galactic civilization, but the practical effect is clear. Instantaneous or near instantaneous transportation across distances that would otherwise take years or centuries to traverse. The process of using a relay is relatively straightforward from a pilot's perspective. As your ship approaches the relay, you transmit the amount of mass that needs to be transported. The relay uses this information to calibrate its field, ensuring that it can handle the load. You position your ship in the approach corridor, a specific flight path that aligns with the relay's operational parameters. Then the relay activates. The experience of relay travel is unique. As the mass effect field envelops your ship, the view outside changes dramatically. Light behaves strangely when passing through a high-intensity mass effect field. Objects outside the field appear to redshift, their light stretched toward longer wavelengths. If the field is strong enough, visible light shifts into the infrared and beyond, while higher energy radiation shifts down into the visible spectrum. Stars disappear, replaced by pulsars, quasars, and other high-energy cosmic phenomena that are normally invisible to the naked eye. To an outside observer, a ship within a relay's field appears blue-shifted, its emissions compressed to higher energies. A ship traveling at 200 times the speed of light, which is a common figure mentioned in Mass Effect lore, would radiate visible light as X-rays and gamma rays. The heat from its hull would be blue-shifted up into the visible spectrum or higher. This makes ships using relays incredibly visible across vast distances, though their signature only propagates at the speed of light, so by the time you detect them, they're long gone. The journey through the relay corridor is brief, sometimes just seconds, sometimes a few minutes depending on the distance. Then you emerge at the destination relay. But here's an interesting detail. You don't emerge at a specific point. There's positional drift, sometimes thousands of kilometers, between where you exit and where the relay itself is located. This drift is random and unpredictable, which makes it impractical to mine or trap a relay effectively. You'd need to cover an enormous volume of space to have any chance of catching ships as they emerge. This drift is normally just an inconvenience, a minor navigation issue that ships compensate for easily. But in certain circumstances, it can be deadly. The Omega-4 relay, which leads to the galactic core, is a perfect example. Standard relay drift of a few thousand kilometers is acceptable in most systems. But when you're emerging near a black hole, that drift can mean the difference between survival and being torn apart by gravitational forces. Only ships with a Reaper IFF, which triggers advanced safety protocols in the relay, can survive the journey. Everyone else becomes part of the debris field that surrounds the relay on the far side. The two types of relays, primary and secondary, serve different purposes in the network. Primary relays are the long-distance connections, the highways that link distant regions of the galaxy. They can propel ships thousands of light years, but they're inflexible, connecting only to their designated partner. Secondary relays are the local roads, connecting systems within a few hundred light years. They can link to any other relay within their range, offering versatility at the cost of distance. This two-tier system creates a network topology that's both robust and limiting. You can reach almost anywhere in the galaxy by chaining relay jumps together, but your route is constrained by which relays connect to which. Some regions are easily accessible, with multiple relay routes leading to them. Others are isolated, reachable only through specific relay chains. This geography of connectivity shaped how galactic civilization developed, determining which regions were colonized first and which remained frontier territory. Chapter 4: The Prothean Myth. For thousands of years, galactic civilization believed that the mass relays were Prothean technology. The Protheans were the dominant civilization of the previous cycle, a galaxy-spanning empire that had united countless species under their rule. They were known for their technological sophistication, their architectural achievements, and their sudden, mysterious disappearance 50,000 years ago. The relays fit perfectly into this narrative. They were ancient, their construction predating any current civilization. They were technologically advanced beyond anything the current cycle could produce, and they were found alongside other Prothean ruins and artifacts. The logical conclusion was that the Protheans had built the relay network, that it was their greatest achievement, the infrastructure that had allowed them to build their empire. This belief was reinforced by Prothean art and architecture. On the Citadel, there's a piece called the Relay Monument, a Prothean artwork depicting a mass relay. Scholars debated its meaning. Some interpreted it as Prothean vanity, a civilization claiming credit for the relays as a symbol of their power. Others saw it as a symbol of galactic unity, the relays representing the connections between species and worlds. The Quarians, after their long exile from their homeworld, came to appreciate the aesthetic beauty of the relays. Talizora Narrea mentions this, noting that after traveling the galaxy for generations, her people had developed an appreciation for the elegant design of these structures. They were functional, yes, but they were also beautiful in a way that transcended mere engineering. The Asari, who were the first of the current cycle's species to discover the relays and the Citadel, built their early civilization around these Prothean gifts. They studied the technology, learned to use it, and eventually shared it with other species as they encountered them. The Solarians, the Turians, the Elcor, the Hanar, all of them built their spacefaring civilizations on the foundation of the relay network. There was even discussion among Asari matriarchs about building new relays. If the Protheans could construct these devices, why couldn't the current cycle? With 50,000 years of additional technological development, surely they could reverse engineer the relays and expand the network. But these discussions never led anywhere. The relays were too complex, their construction materials unknown, their operating principles only partially understood. The current cycle could use the relays, but they couldn't replicate them. This inability to reproduce relay technology should have been a warning sign. The Protheans were advanced, certainly, but they weren't gods. If they could build something, then a civilization with 50,000 more years of development should be able to at least understand how it was built. The fact that the relays remained mysterious, that their construction was beyond the capabilities of multiple advanced species working together, suggested that maybe the Protheans weren't their creators after all. But it wasn't until Commander Shepard's encounter with Sovereign that the truth came out. The Protheans didn't build the mass relays. They didn't build the Citadel either. They were just the most recent civilization to find these structures and use them. Exactly like the Asari, exactly like humanity, exactly like every other species in the current cycle. The real builders were the Reapers. Chapter 5. The Trap. The Reapers are synthetic beings. massive starships with intelligence and power that dwarf anything organic civilization has produced. They're ancient beyond comprehension, existing for millions of years, possibly billions. And they have a purpose, a directive that drives everything they do: the harvest. Every 50,000 years, give or take, the Reapers emerge from dark space, the void between galaxies where they wait in hibernation. They return to the Milky Way and systematically exterminate all advanced organic civilization. Not primitive species, not pre-spaceflight cultures, but any civilization that has achieved a certain level of technological sophistication. They harvest these civilizations, processing their populations into new reapers, preserving them in a twisted form of immortality. Then, when the harvest is complete, the reapers retreat back to dark space. They erase all evidence of their existence, leaving behind only the mass relays and the citadel. And they wait for new civilizations to evolve, to discover spaceflight, to find the relays and the citadel. Wait for these new civilizations to develop along predictable paths, building their societies around the infrastructure the Reapers left behind. And when these civilizations reach the appropriate level of advancement, the Reapers return and harvest them too. This cycle has repeated countless times. The Protheans were just one harvest among many. Before them were the Inusanon, and before them, others whose names are lost to time. Each cycle discovers the relays, uses them to build galactic civilization, and is eventually harvested. The relays aren't gifts. They're bait in a trap that spans millions of years. Sovereign, the Reaper that Shepard encounters, explains this with chilling clarity. The relays serve multiple purposes in the Reaper's design. First, they accelerate technological development. A species that discovers a relay suddenly has access to the entire galaxy. They can colonize new worlds, encounter other species, trade resources and knowledge. This rapid expansion and interaction speeds up technological and social development, shortening the time between cycles. Second, the relays guide how civilizations develop. When you build your entire society around relay travel, you develop certain technologies and neglect others. You focus on mass effect fields, on element zero applications, on the specific branches of physics and engineering that relate to the infrastructure you've inherited. You don't develop alternative FTL methods because why would you? The relays work perfectly. You don't research other forms of long-distance communication because the relay network provides everything you need. This guided development means that each cycle's civilizations are similar in their capabilities and limitations. They're predictable. The Reapers know exactly what level of technology to expect, what weapons will be used against them, what defenses they'll need to overcome. There are no surprises, no unexpected innovations that might threaten the harvest. Third, and perhaps most insidiously, the relays create dependency. Galactic civilization in Mass Effect is completely reliant on the relay network. Every economy, every government, every military strategy assumes that relay travel is available. The relays aren't just convenient, they're essential. Without them, civilization doesn't just slow down, it fragments and collapses. This dependency is the final part of the trap, because the Citadel, that massive space station that serves as the seat of galactic government, is itself a mass relay. It's a special relay, one that connects directly to dark space where the Reapers wait. And the Citadel has a back door, a signal that can be sent by the Keepers, the insect-like creatures that maintain the station. When that signal is sent, the Citadel relay activates, and the Reapers pour through into the heart of galactic civilization. In previous cycles, this worked perfectly. The Reapers would send the signal, the Keepers would activate the Citadel relay, and the Reapers would emerge in the galaxy's capital, instantly decapitating the government and military command structure. With the Citadel fallen and the relay network under Reaper control, they could shut down relay travel, isolating each species on their homeworlds and colonies. Then it was just a matter of systematically harvesting each isolated population. The Protheans, in their final desperate days, managed to sabotage this plan. Scientists on Ilos, working in secret while their civilization burned, altered the Keepers' programming. They made it so the Keepers wouldn't respond to the Reaper signal. This bought the current cycle time, 50,000 years, where civilizations could develop without the Reapers returning on schedule. But it didn't change the fundamental nature of the trap. The relays were still Reaper technology, still designed to guide and limit how civilizations developed. The current cycle was still building on a foundation laid by their eventual destroyers. They were still dependent on infrastructure they didn't fully understand and couldn't replicate. Chapter 6. The Network's Geography. The mass relay network isn't random. Its structure reveals purpose, a carefully designed system that connects the galaxy in specific ways. Understanding this geography helps explain how galactic civilization developed and why certain regions became important while others remained backwaters. The network is densest in the inner regions of the galaxy, where stars are closer together and habitable worlds more common. Here, secondary relays create a web of connections, allowing easy travel between neighboring systems. This is where the Council races established their core territories, where the Citadel is located, where galactic government and commerce are centered. Primary relays extend outward from this core, reaching into the spiral arms and beyond. They're the bridges that connect distant regions, allowing colonization of far-flung systems. But these long-distance connections are limited, creating bottlenecks and choke points. Control a primary relay, and you control access to entire regions of space. Some relays are gravitationally anchored to celestial bodies, like the Charon relay orbiting Pluto. Others float freely in space, their positions carefully tracked to ensure ships can find them. A few have been displaced by cosmic events. The Mu relay, for instance, was pushed off its original position by a supernova 4,000 years ago. It's now enveloped in a cloud of hot gas and dust, making it nearly impossible to detect. Since it's the only relay that connects to the remote Pangaea Expanse cluster, that entire region became effectively isolated when the Mu relay was lost. The Alpha relay, located in Batarian space, was believed to be the oldest relay in the galaxy. It had unique properties, able to connect to multiple other relays across vast distances if properly configured. This made it strategically crucial, a hub that could provide access to regions that would otherwise require multiple relay jumps to reach. Its destruction in 2185, when Commander Shepard crashed an asteroid into it to delay the Reaper invasion, was a significant loss to the network's functionality. The Omega-4 relay is perhaps the most infamous in the network. Located near the space station Omega in the Terminus systems, it glows red instead of the standard blue, a visual warning of its danger. For centuries, no ship that entered the Omega-4 relay ever returned. It became a legend, a death sentence, a mystery that spawned countless theories. The truth was that the Omega-4 relay led to the galactic core, specifically to a location near a black hole where the collectors had established their base. The standard positional drift that all relays produce was fatal in this environment. Ships would emerge thousands of kilometers off target and be pulled into the black hole or torn apart by gravitational shear. Only the collectors, using Reaper IFF technology, could safely navigate the relay. When Shepard and the Normandy SR-2 successfully traversed the Omega-4 relay and returned, it sent shockwaves through Alliance intelligence. The relay was no longer an impassable barrier. Someone had found a way through, which meant the galactic core was potentially accessible. The strategic implications were enormous, though the immediate crisis of the Reaper invasion overshadowed these concerns. The relay network also includes dormant relays, structures that are inactive for unknown reasons. These can be reactivated relatively easily, but doing so without knowing where they lead is dangerous, as the Rachni Wars demonstrated. Many dormant relays remain untouched, their destinations unknown, their potential either promising or catastrophic. This geography of connectivity shaped galactic politics in profound ways. Species whose homeworlds were near major relay hubs had natural advantages in trade and military projection. The Asari, whose territory included several key relay junctions, leveraged this into economic and political dominance. The Turians, controlling relay access to multiple regions, used their position to enforce council law. Humanity's rapid rise was partly due to the Charon relay's fortuitous connections. From Sol, humans could reach the Arcturus system, and from there access multiple relay routes into council space and beyond. This gave humanity immediate access to the galactic community, allowing them to establish colonies and trade relationships far faster than would have been possible with conventional FTL alone. The terminus systems, by contrast, were poorly connected to council space. Reaching them required traveling through specific relay chains, and the relays within the terminus were often controlled by local warlords or criminal organizations. This isolation allowed the terminus to develop independently of council influence, becoming a haven for pirates, mercenaries, and anyone who wanted to operate outside council law. Chapter 7. Life between the relays. While the relays enable instantaneous travel across vast distances, they don't eliminate the need for conventional FTL drives. Ships still need to travel from planets to relays, from relays to their destinations within a system, and sometimes between systems when no relay connection exists. Understanding this conventional FTL travel is crucial to understanding how galactic civilization actually functions. Mass Effect FTL drives work on the same basic principle as the relays, but on a much smaller scale. Element Zero cores generate Mass Effect fields that reduce a ship's mass, allowing it to be accelerated to faster-than-light speeds with reasonable energy expenditure. The exact speed varies depending on the drive's size and quality, but a typical figure mentioned in Mass Effect lore is that ships can traverse roughly 12 light-years in a day's cruise. This might sound fast, and it is compared to conventional propulsion. But in galactic terms, it's painfully slow. The Milky Way is about 100,000 light-years in diameter. At 12 light-years per day, crossing the galaxy would take over 22 years of continuous travel. And that's assuming you could maintain that speed indefinitely, which you can't. FTL drives accumulate static electrical charge as they operate. This charge builds up in the drive core, and if it's not discharged, it will eventually discharge into the ship's hull. The result is catastrophic. Electronics fried, bulkheads melted, crew killed instantly. Ships can typically operate their FTL drives for about 50 hours before reaching charge saturation and needing to discharge. The safe way to discharge a drive core is to land on a planet and establish a connection to the ground, like a lightning rod. Larger vessels that can't land must discharge into a planetary magnetic field. The process creates spectacular auroral displays as sheets of lightning jump from the ship into the field. But the ship must retract its sensors and weapons during discharge, leaving it blind and vulnerable. Discharging at a moon with a weak magnetic field can take days. Discharging into a gas giant's powerful field might take less than an hour. This need to periodically discharge means that long-distance FTL travel isn't just about speed. It's about logistics. You need to plan your route to include discharge points. You need to carry enough supplies to sustain the crew between stops. You need to account for the time spent vulnerable during discharge. A journey that would take a week of continuous FTL travel might actually take a month when you factor in all these practical considerations. This is why the relays are so crucial. They bypass all of these limitations. No charge buildup, no need to discharge, no weeks or months of travel time. A relay jump takes hours at most, and you emerge ready to continue your journey immediately. The difference between relay travel and conventional FTL is the difference between taking a highway and walking. Both will get you there eventually, but one is vastly more practical. The Reapers, interestingly, don't seem to suffer from the same limitations as organic ships. According to Codex entries, Reapers can travel nearly 30 light-years in a 24-hour period, roughly twice the speed of Citadel ships, and they apparently don't need to discharge their drive cores, or at least can go much longer between discharges. This gives them a significant strategic advantage. They can cross the galaxy in years rather than decades, and they can do so without the vulnerable discharge periods that plague organic vessels. When the relays were damaged at the end of Mass Effect 3, the immediate concern wasn't just about convenience. It was about survival. Fleets that had gathered at Earth for the final battle were suddenly stranded, unable to quickly return to their homeworlds. Supplies would run out. Ships would need to discharge their drives. The journey home, which would have taken days through the relay network, would now take years of conventional FTL travel. This is why the epilogue scenes showing the relays being rebuilt are so important. Without them, galactic civilization would fragment. Each species would be isolated on their homeworlds, and whatever colonies they could reach with conventional FTL. Trade would collapse. Communication would slow to a crawl. The galaxy would become vast and lonely again, each species alone in the dark. Chapter 8. The Conduit and Prothean Innovation. While the Protheans didn't build the mass relay network, they did achieve something remarkable. They figured out how to build their own relay. The Conduit, a miniature mass relay constructed on Ilos, represents one of the most impressive technological achievements of the Prothean cycle. The Protheans were, by all accounts, a sophisticated civilization. They had studied the mass relays extensively, understanding their function, if not their full construction. They knew about the Citadel's true nature as a relay to dark space, and in their final desperate days, as the Reapers harvested their civilization, a group of scientists on Ilos worked on a plan to break the cycle. These scientists had put themselves in stasis, hoping to survive the harvest and emerge after the Reapers had left. Their plan was to use the Conduit, a small relay they'd built, to travel from Ilos directly to the Citadel. Once there, they would alter the Keeper's programming, preventing them from responding to the Reaper signal. This would buy the next cycle time, delaying the Reaper's return. The Conduit was a remarkable piece of engineering. Unlike the massive structures of the relay network, it was small enough to fit inside a Prothean facility. It was a one-way connection, able to send matter to the Citadel but not receive anything back. And it worked on a much shorter range than standard relays, connecting 2 points within the same star cluster, rather than across thousands of light years. But it worked. The Prothean scientists successfully used the Conduit to reach the Citadel. They altered the Keeper's programming as planned, and then they died, trapped on the Citadel, with no way to return to Ilos, slowly starving as their supplies ran out. Their sacrifice bought the current cycle 50,000 years, but they never knew if their plan had succeeded. 50,000 years later, Commander Shepard would use the same Conduit for a different purpose. Saren, the rogue spectre working with Sovereign, had discovered the conduit's location. He planned to use it to reach the Citadel and manually activate the relay to dark space, since the Keepers were no longer responding to the Reaper signal. Shepard pursued him through the conduit, emerging on the Citadel just in time to stop Sovereign's plan. The conduit's existence raises interesting questions about relay technology. If the Protheans could build a functional relay, even a limited one, then the technology isn't completely beyond organic understanding. It's difficult, certainly, requiring resources and knowledge that only a galaxy-spanning civilization at the height of its power could muster. But it's possible. This suggests that the current cycle, given enough time and resources, might also be able to build new relays. The Asari matriarch who proposed this wasn't being naive. It's theoretically achievable. The question is whether it's worth the enormous investment required, and whether building new relays would actually benefit galactic civilization, or just create new dependencies on infrastructure that's still not fully understood. There's also the question of what happened to the Prothean knowledge about relay construction. The scientists on Elos built the conduit, which means they had detailed technical specifications, construction techniques, and theoretical understanding of how relays work. But this knowledge was apparently lost when they died on the Citadel. The current cycle inherited Prothean data caches, but none of them seem to contain relay construction information. This might be deliberate. The Protheans, having figured out that the relays were Reaper technology, might have decided that relay construction knowledge was too dangerous to preserve. Building more relays would just create more dependencies on Reaper infrastructure, more ways for the Reapers to control and manipulate organic civilization. Better to let that knowledge die and force the next cycle to develop alternative technologies. Or it might simply be that the conduit project was so secret, so isolated, that its data never made it into the archives that survived. The scientists on Elos were cut off from the rest of their civilization, working in a hidden facility while their species was being harvested. Their knowledge died with them, leaving the current cycle to rediscover relay technology from scratch if they want to build their own. Chapter 9. The Relay Monument and Cultural Significance. On the Citadel's Presidium, there's a piece of Prothean art called the Relay Monument. It's a stylized representation of a mass relay, elegant and abstract, clearly meant to be symbolic rather than literal. Scholars have debated its meaning for centuries, and their interpretations reveal a lot about how different species view the relays and their significance. Some interpret the monument as Prothean vanity, a civilization claiming credit for the relays as a symbol of their power and reach. In this reading, the Protheans were saying, "Look what we built. Look at the network that allowed us to rule the galaxy." It's a monument to imperial ambition, to the pride that comes from controlling infrastructure that connects worlds. Others see it as a symbol of galactic unity. The relays connect species and worlds, allowing communication and cooperation across vast distances. In this interpretation, the monument represents the Prothean ideal of a unified galaxy, different species working together, connected by the relay network. It's aspirational rather than boastful, a vision of what galactic civilization could be. Both interpretations are probably wrong, or at least incomplete, because they assume the Protheans built the relays. Knowing that the Reapers were the actual builders changes the monument's meaning entirely. Maybe it was a warning, a reminder that the infrastructure they depended on came from an external source. Maybe it was a symbol of the trap they were caught in, beautiful and functional, but ultimately serving purposes they didn't fully understand. The Quarians have their own relationship with the relays. After 3 centuries of exile traveling the galaxy in their migrant fleet, they've developed an appreciation for the aesthetic beauty of these structures. Tali mentions this, noting that when you spend your life traveling between the stars, you start to see the relays not just as tools, but as landmarks, as monuments to the possibility of connection across the void. For the Quarians, the relays represent both hope and loss. Hope because they enable the migrant fleet to survive, allowing the Quarians to trade with other species, to find resources, to maintain their nomadic existence. Loss because the relays are a reminder of what they've lost: a homeworld, a place to discharge their ship's drives safely, a permanent home instead of endless wandering. Humanity's relationship with the relays is more pragmatic. Humans discovered them relatively recently, and their first major interaction with the relay network led to war. The relays represent opportunity, certainly, but also danger. They're the reason humanity could expand so rapidly into the galaxy, but they're also the reason humanity stumbled into conflict with the Turians. The First Contact War left a lasting impression on human culture. The phrase Relay 314 became shorthand for the dangers of rushing into the unknown, for the consequences of acting without understanding the context. Human military doctrine emphasizes caution around relays, careful scouting before activation, and respect for the regulations that govern their use. The Asari, as the first species of the current cycle to discover the relays and the Citadel, have the longest relationship with this technology. For them, the relays are foundational to their civilization. Asari culture, philosophy, and government all developed in the context of a galaxy connected by the relay network. They can't imagine civilization without it. This creates a kind of blindness. The Asari are so accustomed to the relays that they don't question them. They're just part of the natural order, like stars or planets. The idea that the relays might be a trap, that they might be guiding Asari development in specific directions, is almost unthinkable. It would require questioning the very foundation of their civilization. The Turians, as the Council's military arm, view the relays primarily through a strategic lens. Their infrastructure that must be protected and controlled. Turian fleets patrol the relay network, monitoring for unauthorized activations, responding to threats. For Turians, the relays are both an asset and a vulnerability. They enable rapid military deployment, but they also create choke points that must be defended. The Solarians, with their intelligence-focused culture, are probably the species most aware of the relay's implications. Solarian intelligence agencies have undoubtedly studied the relay network extensively, mapping its structure, analyzing its strategic significance, and considering its origins. If any council species suspected that the relays weren't Prothean before Sovereign revealed the truth, it would be the Solarians. But even the Solarians, with all their intelligence and analysis, were caught in the trap. They built their civilization on the relay network, just like everyone else. They developed technologies that assumed relay travel would always be available. They made strategic plans that depended on rapid deployment through the network. Knowing that you're in a trap doesn't help if you can't escape it. Chapter 10. The Destruction and Rebuilding. At the climax of Mass Effect 3, Commander Shepard faces an impossible choice. The Crucible, a superweapon built by combining the knowledge of multiple cycles, is ready to fire, but its effects will propagate through the mass relay network, using the relays as a distribution system to affect the entire galaxy. The exact consequences depend on which option Shepard chooses, but in most endings, the relays are damaged or destroyed by the energy surge. The structures that have connected the galaxy for millions of years, that have survived supernovas and countless wars, are suddenly gone or non-functional. The immediate aftermath is chaos. Fleets gathered at Earth for the final battle against the Reapers are stranded. Ships from dozens of species, thousands of light years from their homeworlds, suddenly have no way to get home quickly. The journey that would have taken days through the relay network will now take years of conventional FTL travel. Supplies become a critical concern. Ships carry enough food, water, and fuel for their missions, but those missions assumed relay travel would be available. Now they're looking at years of travel time. Rationing becomes necessary. Ships that can't sustain their crews for the journey home will need to find habitable worlds to resupply or to settle permanently. Communication across the galaxy slows to a crawl. Without the relay network, messages must be carried by ships traveling at conventional FTL speeds. News that would have spread across the galaxy in days now takes years to propagate. Each species is suddenly isolated, uncertain about what's happening in other regions of space. The economic impact is devastating. Galactic trade depended on the relay network. Goods could be transported across vast distances quickly and cheaply. Without the relays, trade becomes impractical, except between neighboring systems. Economies that specialized in producing goods for export suddenly have no markets. Colonies that depended on imports face shortages. But the epilogue scenes in Mass Effect 3 show the relays being rebuilt. The exact timeline isn't specified, but the implication is that galactic civilization, working together, can restore the network. This raises interesting questions about how much the current cycle has learned about relay technology. If they can rebuild the relays, then they understand the technology well enough to reproduce it. This is a significant achievement, suggesting that the current cycle has surpassed the Protheans in at least this one area. The Protheans could build a miniature relay, but there's no evidence they could build full-scale relays or repair damaged ones. The rebuilding effort would require unprecedented cooperation. Every species would need to contribute resources, knowledge, and labor. The Asari would provide their understanding of mass effect fields and element zero applications. The Solarians would contribute their scientific expertise and analytical capabilities. The Turians would handle logistics and coordination. Humanity would bring their adaptability and engineering prowess. This cooperation, born from necessity, might actually be one of the positive outcomes of the relay network's destruction. The current cycle would no longer be simply using infrastructure they inherited. They would be building their own network, understanding it fully, making conscious choices about how to design and implement it. They could also make improvements. The new relays might not have the same vulnerabilities as the old ones. They might include safety features that prevent the kind of catastrophic drift that made the Omega-4 relay so dangerous. They might be designed to be more easily maintained and repaired, rather than being nearly indestructible, but also nearly impossible to modify. Or they might choose not to rebuild the network exactly as it was. Maybe they would build fewer relays, connecting only the most important systems. Maybe they would focus on improving conventional FTL technology instead, reducing dependence on fixed infrastructure. Maybe they would develop entirely new transportation methods, learning from the relay network's limitations. The destruction and rebuilding of the relays represents a turning point for galactic civilization. For the first time in millions of years, organic species have the opportunity to shape their own infrastructure, rather than simply using what the Reapers left behind. They can make conscious choices about how to connect their galaxy, rather than accepting the connections that were predetermined for them. Chapter 11: Alternative Perspectives. Throughout this exploration, we've focused primarily on the relay network as it exists in the Milky Way. But Mass Effect Andromeda introduces an interesting counterpoint. What does galactic civilization look like without mass relays? The Andromeda Initiative's journey to the Andromeda Galaxy took 634 years, even with advanced FTL drives. The arcs traveled at roughly 3,900 times the speed of light, far faster than conventional Milky Way FTL, but still painfully slow compared to relay travel. This journey time shaped everything about the initiative's planning and execution. The colonists traveled in cryosleep, their bodies frozen to prevent aging during the centuries-long journey. The arcs were designed to be self-sufficient, carrying everything needed to establish colonies in a completely unknown galaxy. There was no possibility of resupply, no way to call for help if something went wrong. The initiative was completely on its own. When they arrived in Andromeda, they found no mass relays. The Helios cluster, where they established their initial colonies, had to be explored using conventional FTL travel. The Tempest, the Pathfinder's ship, could traverse 13 light-years per day, making it one of the fastest ships in the Initiative's fleet. But even at that speed, traveling between systems took days or weeks rather than hours. This fundamentally changed how exploration and colonization worked. In the Milky Way, you could activate a relay and instantly access an entire region of space. In Andromeda, every system had to be reached through conventional FTL travel. Exploration was slower, more methodical, more dangerous. You couldn't quickly retreat through a relay if you encountered something hostile. The Ket, the primary antagonistic species in Andromeda, had developed their own FTL technology. Their drives functioned similarly to Milky Way drives for short distances, but over longer distances, they worked more like Alcubierre drives, warping space around the ship. This was less efficient than mass relays but more flexible, allowing the Ket to travel between clusters without fixed infrastructure. The absence of relays in Andromeda meant that the initiative couldn't rely on inherited infrastructure. They had to build everything themselves, establishing their own network of colonies and outposts connected by conventional FTL travel. This was slower and more resource-intensive than Milky Way colonization, but it also meant they weren't dependent on technology they didn't fully understand. This raises an interesting question. Would the Milky Way have been better off without the mass relays? If organic civilizations had been forced to develop their own FTL technology from scratch, without the crutch of Reaper infrastructure, would they have been more advanced by the time the Reapers returned? The argument for this is compelling. Without relays, civilizations would have invested more in improving conventional FTL drives. They might have developed the kind of advanced drives the Andromeda Initiative used, or even better. They would have been less dependent on fixed infrastructure, more adaptable, more self-sufficient. But the counter-argument is equally strong. Without relays, galactic civilization might never have formed at all. The distances between stars are so vast that conventional FTL travel, even at advanced speeds, makes regular contact between species difficult. The Asari might never have met the Solarians. The Council might never have formed. Each species would have developed in isolation, never benefiting from the exchange of ideas and technologies that comes from contact with other civilizations. The relays enabled galactic civilization, but they also shaped it in ways that served the Reaper's purposes. This is the fundamental dilemma. The infrastructure that connected the galaxy was also the infrastructure that made the galaxy vulnerable to harvest. You can't have one without the other. Chapter 12. The Physics of Impossibility. Let's talk about the sheer scale of what the mass relays accomplish, because it's easy to take them for granted in the context of a science fiction universe where FTL travel is common. But what the relays do is genuinely staggering, even by the standards of a galaxy that has mastered mass effect fields. A primary relay can transport a ship thousands of light years instantaneously. Let's think about what that means. Light, traveling at 299,792 kilometers per second, takes years to cross those distances. A relay moves a ship across that same distance in seconds or minutes. The effective speed is millions or billions of times the speed of light. The energy required for this is almost incomprehensible. even with mass effect fields reducing the ship's mass to near zero. The acceleration involved is enormous. And this energy has to be generated, controlled, and directed with perfect precision. A tiny error in the relay's calculations could send a ship off course by thousands of light years, or tear it apart with gravitational shear. The relays do this routinely, thousands of times per day across the galaxy, with a failure rate that's essentially zero. They've been doing it for millions of years, through countless cycles, with minimal maintenance. The engineering involved is so far beyond current galactic civilization that it might as well be magic. Consider the Element Zero core at the heart of each relay. Element Zero is rare and expensive in the current cycle. A few kilograms of EZO is enough to power a starship's FTL drive. The relays contain massive quantities of the stuff, tons or possibly hundreds of tons, all working in perfect synchronization to generate the fields necessary for relay travel. Where did this Element Zero come from? How was it refined and processed? How was it installed in the relays? These are questions that current galactic civilization can't answer. They can mine EZO from deposits created by supernovas. They can refine it for use in drive cores and biotic implants, but they can't produce it in the quantities or purity that the relays require. The construction materials are equally mysterious. The substance the relays are made from is completely unknown to current science. It's not any element on the periodic table, not any alloy or composite that can be analyzed and reproduced. It's something else entirely, possibly something that doesn't exist naturally in the universe and can only be created through processes that current civilization doesn't understand. The quantum shields that protect the relays are another impossibility. They lock the structure in place at the subatomic level, making it immune to damage from anything short of a supernova. Current shield technology can't do this. Kinetic barriers can stop projectiles and energy weapons, but they can't prevent structural damage from massive impacts or extreme temperatures. The relay shields are operating on a completely different principle. And then there's the question of how the relays know where to send ships. Each relay is paired with one or more other relays, and it can target these relays with perfect accuracy across thousands of light years. This requires knowing the exact position of the target relay, accounting for the movement of stars and the expansion of space itself, and adjusting the trajectory in real time to ensure the ship arrives at the correct location. Current galactic civilization can barely track objects across interstellar distances. The idea of targeting something thousands of light years away with the precision necessary for relay travel is beyond their capabilities. Yet the relays do it effortlessly, every time, without fail. This is why the relays are so effective as a trap. They're so far beyond what organic civilization can achieve that they seem like gifts from benevolent precursors. The idea that they might be tools of control, that they might be deliberately limiting technological development is hard to accept when the technology itself is so impressive. But that's exactly the point. The Reapers built the relays to be impressive, to be irresistible. They're the carrot that leads organic civilization down a predetermined path. And because they work so well, because they're so useful and reliable, nobody questions them until it's too late. Chapter 13. The Relay Network as Metaphor. Beyond their function in Mass Effect's plot, the mass relays serve as a powerful metaphor for inherited infrastructure and technological dependency. This metaphor resonates with real-world concerns about how we develop and use technology. Consider our own internet infrastructure. Most people use it daily without understanding how it works. We depend on protocols and systems developed decades ago, built on foundations laid by previous generations. We inherit this infrastructure and build our lives around it, just as Mass Effect civilizations build around the relay network. But who controls this infrastructure? Who decides how it develops? What happens if it fails or is deliberately shut down? These are questions we're grappling with in the real world, and they're the same questions that Mass Effect explores through the relay network. The relays also represent the double-edged nature of technological advancement. They enable incredible things: galactic civilization, interspecies cooperation, rapid exploration and colonization. But they also create vulnerabilities. The more dependent you become on a technology, the more catastrophic its loss becomes. This is true for any infrastructure: power grids, water systems, transportation networks, communication systems. We build our societies around these technologies, and we're vulnerable if they fail. The relay network is just an extreme example of this principle, where the dependency is galactic in scale, and the consequences of failure are civilizational collapse. There's also a metaphor about progress and its costs. The relays accelerate development, allowing civilizations to advance faster than they would naturally. But this acceleration comes at a price. They develop in specific directions, neglecting alternatives, becoming specialized in ways that serve the Reaper's purposes. In our world, we see similar patterns. Technologies that become dominant shape how we think about problems and solutions. We develop expertise in using these technologies, but we might neglect other approaches that could be equally or more valuable. We optimize for the tools we have, rather than developing new tools that might serve us better. The revelation that the Protheans didn't build the relays is a metaphor for discovering that the foundations of your civilization aren't what you thought they were. It's like learning that a technology you've depended on for generations was designed by someone with ulterior motives, that it's been shaping your development in ways you didn't realize. This creates an existential crisis. Do you continue using the technology, knowing its true purpose? Do you try to develop alternatives, even though that will be slower and more difficult? Do you try to understand the technology well enough to modify it, to make it serve your purposes, rather than its creators? These are the questions that Mass Effect's civilizations face after learning the truth about the relays. And they're questions that we might face in our own world as we become more dependent on technologies we don't fully understand, developed by entities whose interests might not align with our own. Conclusion: the weight of connection. We've traveled far in this exploration, from humanity's discovery of the Charon relay to the network's destruction and rebuilding. We've examined how the relays work, who built them and why, and what they mean for galactic civilization. Now, as we approach the end of this journey, it's worth reflecting on what the mass relays represent in Mass Effect's broader narrative. The relays are fundamentally about connection. They connect worlds and species, enabling communication and cooperation across vast distances. They make galactic civilization possible, allowing different species to meet, trade, share knowledge, and work together toward common goals. Without the relays, the galaxy would be a lonely place, each species isolated on their homeworld, never knowing that others existed. But connection comes with costs. When you connect to something, you become dependent on that connection. When you build your civilization around infrastructure, you become vulnerable to its loss. When you inherit technology from previous generations, you inherit their assumptions and limitations, along with their achievements. The mass relays embody this tension. They're simultaneously the greatest gift and the most insidious trap. They enable everything good about galactic civilization, while also making that civilization vulnerable to the Reaper's harvest. You can't have one without the other. The connection and the vulnerability are inseparable. This is why the relays are such a perfect symbol for Mass Effect's themes. The series is about choice and consequence, about how the decisions we make shape our future in ways we can't always predict. The decision to use the relays, made by countless civilizations across millions of years, enabled galactic civilization, but also doomed it to the harvest cycle. Commander Shepard's journey is, in many ways, about breaking free from this cycle, about finding a way to preserve the connections that the relays enable, while escaping the trap they represent. Whether Shepard succeeds depends on the choices the player makes, but the attempt itself is significant. It's an assertion that organic civilization can shape its own destiny, that inherited infrastructure doesn't have to determine the future. The mass relays will continue to fascinate Mass Effect fans because they're more than just a plot device or a fast travel mechanic. They're a fully realized piece of science fiction world building, with implications that ripple through every aspect of the setting. They raise questions about technology and dependency, about progress and its costs, about the relationship between infrastructure and civilization. And they're beautiful. Those massive structures glowing blue in the darkness of space represent possibility. The possibility of connection across impossible distances. The possibility of meeting other minds, other perspectives, other ways of being. The possibility of building something larger than any single species could achieve alone. That beauty is real, even knowing the trap hidden within it. The connections the relays enable are genuine, even if they serve purposes their users don't fully understand. The civilizations built around the relay network are real achievements, even if they're also part of the Reaper's design. This is the final lesson of the mass relays, that something can be both gift and trap, both enabling and limiting. both beautiful and dangerous, that the infrastructure we inherit shapes us in ways we don't always recognize, that connection comes with dependency, and dependency creates vulnerability, but also that connection is worth it, that building bridges across the void, meeting other minds, working together toward common goals, these things have value even when they come with costs. The mass relays enabled galactic civilization, and galactic civilization, for all its flaws and vulnerabilities, was worth having. As you travel through Mass Effect's galaxy, jumping from relay to relay, take a moment to appreciate these structures. Think about what they represent, what they enable, what they cost. Think about the millions of years they've existed, the countless civilizations that have used them, the purposes they serve, both obvious and hidden. And remember, every connection is also a dependency. Every gift might also be a trap. Every piece of inherited infrastructure shapes how we develop, often in ways we don't recognize until it's too late. The mass relays are a warning as much as they are a wonder, but they're also a reminder that connection, despite its costs, is what makes civilization possible. That reaching across the void to touch other minds is worth the risk. That building something larger than ourselves, even on foundations we didn't lay, is a fundamentally worthwhile endeavor. The mass relays stand as monuments to this truth, that we are stronger together than apart, that connection enables possibilities that isolation never could, and that the bridges we build, whether across rivers or across galaxies, are what define us as civilizations. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of Mass Effect's mass relays. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the technology that connects a galaxy, consider subscribing for more explorations of science fiction's most fascinating concepts. Until next time, may your jumps be smooth, your drives stay charged, and your destinations always be worth the journey. Safe travels, and remember, the galaxy is vast, but the relays make it feel like home.